hopefully we're going to give you some really useful takeaway tips and supports. Okay, so this is just really the aims of what we hope to achieve. So like we said, there is so much information. I mean, sometimes it feels like there's so much information online, but I also think menopause is one of these areas, alongside a lot of women's health issues, that can be kind of neglected to the side a bit. And it's hard to find information that is maybe consistent or relates to you. So we really hope that we can give you some knowledge about exactly what is menopause. And I think understanding exactly what is happening in your body, I think, is a really big one. I know when I speak to clients, I think that's the biggest thing, of just not understanding why these changes are occurring. So hopefully we can explain a bit behind that, talking about how this affects our well-being, our health, and then supporting this through herbs, supplements, lifestyle, and then also diet. And then followed just by Q&A at the end. So Dee, I don't know if you want to touch upon this a little bit. I know.
Yes, we get confusion. I had a wonderful moment this week when I was in a cafe. I watched a lady working behind the counter and realized that she was me. She had been through menopause and she was having one of those moments, and with a queue of people waiting for something important to happen, i.e. get their cup of coffee. So 75% of women experience menopause symptoms. But I have a feeling that more people than that experience symptoms but don't actually recognize them. 25% of people describe their symptoms as severe, and 30% apparently have long-term symptoms which may last 7 years or more. But when I'm in clinic and I'm working with patients, and often as a herbalist, you've seen people, it's a bit like a family doctor, you've seen people for years, and somebody you've known, in my case, often I've known them since they were teenagers, and they're coming through and they're starting to experience, in their late 30s, early 40s, they're starting to notice that the periods aren't quite as they were, that they're finding it a bit more stressful to manage things. And I think it's really important that we sort of drill down into what these changes are, how to recognize them, because we need to understand how our bodies work with hormones, but also how our modern way of living, our environment, what is happening within our life impacts on this. I mean, we all know we can go away on holiday, and for someone of my age, can go away on holiday and not really experience very many hot flushes. Or younger women might go away on holiday and not really experience their premenstrual syndrome because they're relaxed, come back, move into the busy lifestyle that you have, and then you tend to find that you have symptoms. So we need to understand the changes and how they affect our body, and the things that we can do around ourselves to support ourselves through this kind of change.
And I think that can be one of the big barriers when women are first kind of starting noticing these changes in their kind of well-being. And I think women, we're so in tune with how we're feeling and what's going on, but I think it can be really hard when you maybe go to your GP or health practitioner, and maybe your symptoms are being passed aside as just symptoms maybe of aging, which I think that can be hard as well. You're not always being aware of exactly, this is menopause and this is what I need to do. So yeah, like Dee said, that hopefully
it's very easy in a consultation, a short consultation, particularly, I'm looking often at mums who might have to bring a young child with them into the consultation, and they are, in their late 40s, and they're talking to me, trying to tell me about what's going on. They're not understanding it. They're still having regular periods, and they just don't understand that menopause could come along, or perimenopause could start shifting those hormones and having a profound effect on you, for a number of years. I mean, I've seen them last for 10 years, 7 years, 10 years. I've seen those changes. Basically, we are all a mass of hormone our whole lives, really. And it's how we gently work with that and recognize it and understand that, things like anxiety or not sleeping properly can all come from these hormonal changes.
Yeah, definitely. So yeah, you just touched on that as well. I mean, the menopause is broken down into perimenopause, menopause, and then also postmenopause. So menopause is then defined when you have kind of 12 months without a period. But perimenopause is a time when your hormones will be changing. But like Dee said, you might still be having a period. They might be a little bit more irregular, but you might put that down to other things as well. Maybe if you are stressed or lack of sleep, or maybe some sort of change, you might not always be aware that actually it is perimenopause. And I think that is, again, one of these challenges, trying to identify exactly that point in time.
And I think it's really important to realize that, we're all attuned to the fact that hormone changes, but it can change suddenly. We're talking about the natural menopause. I mean, I might suddenly, I'm looking at that slide, and I know we wrote it together. I'm wondering, well, how natural is the Western menopause? But that's another big question that we could start talking about. The medical menopause, which obviously I see often in younger patients, people who we're trying to work with fibroids or polycystic ovaries, and then you might want to create an artificial, a medical menopause for a period of time to see if one can correct things. And then the surgical menopause, which is a whole different game, and is, it's almost, as I've described it, it's like falling off the edge of a cliff, as well as the reasons behind that surgical menopause, which can be, hugely stressful and hugely worrying. You're suddenly dealing with a storm of hormones going around. And this is an area that I work with. I mean, as you know, I work with this particular area quite a lot.
Great. So yeah, like you said, it is a bit of a hormonal storm, and there is a lot of changes that are going on hormonally when we're thinking about our menopause, and a lot of it is driven by basically the ovaries stopping producing estrogen. And I'll go on to a graph on the next slide to explain a little bit more about what these hormones are exactly doing. But really, it is that drop in estrogen, and we'll come on to a lot later on, talking about some of the symptoms experienced and some kind of well-being factors. And it is all coming back to that estrogen and then also the progesterone as well. So going to try and explain a little bit about the hormones without it getting too complicated, but hopefully it'll make sense. But I think it does, again, it just helps feed into this a bit. I think one of the first things is just understanding exactly what is happening within your body. I think that could be the first step to just being able to understand a little bit more and have awareness of what's going on. So during our premenopause, during our reproductive years, our body releases a hormone called follicular stimulating hormone, and that goes to our ovaries and it goes to our follicles and tells them get ready to mature to become an egg. And when this egg is released, it also releases estrogen with it. So you have rising estrogen levels as you're going through menstruation. This also releases progesterone, which helps thicken the endometrial lining and again prepares your body for implantation of a fertilized egg. When this doesn't happen, it causes then the uterine wall to shed, and that's when you get a period. When we age, the number of follicles we have starts slowly declining. And it means our body is still releasing this hormone called follicular stimulating hormone, FSH. However, we're going to have actually less follicles to stimulate, and that's actually going to slow the release of estrogen down. But our body is going to combat this. It's going to keep releasing FSH. This was actually used as a bit of a marker for perimenopause at one point, this kind of rising levels of SHA, but now it's not really routinely used, as it can vary quite a lot. But what happens is the more our body releases this FSH, our follicles actually become a bit overstimulated. And actually the follicles stop responding, and eventually they stop maturing. And actually that means that ovulation stops. So estrogen has then a massive decline, as you'll see by this graph, and progesterone also stops because our body doesn't need to prepare for fertilization. So that is really the main driver of menopause, and it's while it does happen in different ages to different individuals, as everyone has a different number of follicles as well.
And it's very easy to talk. Well, not easy. I thought you did very well. I think the chemistry of it when you have brain fog is just incredible. But when you're in clinic, we have to go on symptom pictures. And this is where it can get difficult in a clinical environment, because you might see somebody, we can see 35 years old, and they're coming in and they're talking about things that you think to yourself, well, when I make that list, I might think that was, perimenopause. And it affects us from head to toe. And it's really important that we understand this. So, when I'm looking at somebody and trying to help them untangle what's going on with their health, we start at the top and we work all the way through. And it seems to affect almost every body system. So we have, change the texture of our skin and our hair. We get mood swings, anxiety, brain fog. And you think, well, what is brain fog? Well, brain fog is when you just can't remember someone's name, or you forget where you've put your door key, and little things like that. And you're struggling to remember things when you're at work and presenting, or when you're doing something very simple at home. It's anxiety and mood swings. Now, everybody, I think, has suffered and felt and experienced anxiety and mood swings at certain times, even if it's just that sort of huge adrenaline rush that gives you that, and then you have you feel a bit low afterwards. And all of those things are part of this. Hot flushes and palpitations. Well, we know about hot flushes. It seemed to be, oh, you've got a hot flush, you must be menopausal. I mean, I can remember my mum throwing the window open in the sitting room while she was wearing her kaftan. that was the fashion of those days. But I didn't understand what was going on, and she was in her early 50s. But you also get night sweats. But then, what is a hot flush? So many people ask me that, and I don't have a hot flush. And I say, well, what are you feeling? And she said, well, I feel a sort of like bit of anxiety, and I feel a little bit warm from here up. And I think, well, that's a hot flush. Sleep disruption. Well, we all have sleep disruption. Mums with young children have sleep disruption. Sometimes it's difficult to get that pattern back. Night sweats. Now, often the night sweat, you're never sure if you're waking because you're sweating or because you then wake and then you sweat. And I always get asked that question. Bit of weight gain around the tummy and the hips and the top of the legs. That's very, very common, but it's more noticeable. What I call fleeting joint pains, where you wake up in the morning, you have to go like this to get yourself moving again. And the bit that nobody really bothers to talk about very much, it sort of always sneaks in at the end of the consultation, where someone's held back and not quite sure about ready to tell you this. And they go, well, there's low libido. So I always get straight in there and say, the other side of it is we have low libido. We often get vaginal dryness, and that means it's uncomfortable when you're trying to make love. And not only that, you get thinning of the vaginal tissue, so it's much more likely to get urinary tract infections. You're much more likely to get thrush, which you might not have had since you were a teenager or something like that. So all of these things present in clinic. And at different times, different things become the most important to the patient. Brain fog might be the most important thing when you're trying to work in a busy job. But when you're trying to work with the family and look after everybody, then mood swings are not helpful. And when your personal life and the person you're close to and you're wanting to be intimate, and you don't have any desire and they do, and how do you balance that? How do you have that conversation at a time when you're not feeling particularly attractive because you're hot and you've put on weight? And it's complex. Everything in health is complex, and I really think this is one of the most complex issues that we are ever going to have to untangle. And it happens to all women. And hormone change happens to men as well. That's another subject.
But I think that I really like that analogy that you do, the kind of head to toe. And I think also it is identifying what that kind of that I'm getting these hot flushes, or my sleep is bad because of this, and just being able to piece it all together. I know one of the ones I do get commonly in my consultations is women saying that I only used to try and like store fat around my thighs, and I've always been used to that, and now all of a sudden it's kind of come around my midsection and I can't seem to shift it. And it's such a big thing that people come to me and they feel so almost confused and just baffled almost by their body. They think, I haven't changed anything, why is this happening? So I think just knowing that, and it is to do with estrogen, actually our bodies reflect more of a male pattern, where that's where men store fat around their body, is around their tummy. So yeah, it's all really interesting. And then here is just some risk factors as well. So thinking about a mixture of the kind of low estrogen levels, but also changes things like our gut microbiome as well, but also changes in how our body is working, maybe how we are moving, our diet. So you will have a slightly higher risk of blood pressure, can increase your risk of heart disease, changes cholesterol level, increased risk of osteoporosis, bone fractures and obesity, which we'll all come on to a little bit later. So this isn't any sort of kind of scaremongering, but it's just making women aware that it's just another thing being thrown on our plate.
It's interesting, because I'm going to, somehow a little bit disagree here, because, yes, these things, but they're risk factors for many people as they grow older. So I think that we have to, understand that the aging body, there is an increased risk factor of many of those things. And yes, that we all, as we age, put on fat around our tummy, and it's quite an interesting one, because we're getting withdrawal of estrogen from our ovaries, but our body still wants estrogen. So in a way, it makes us it puts a bit more fat around our tummy, and we have a different type of estrogen that can be found in fat cells. So there's a reason why this kind of thing is happening. But these are risk factors that are there for many aging bodies. So whilst menopause, they tend to be more highlighted, and this is the discussion that many women have in a GP surgery. It's just like, these are your risk factors, bang, 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 bang. And so I think what we should do is we should give you bang, bang, bang for it, and there's your solution. And it's not really, in my view, looking at the individual, at trying to see, well, how are these life changes that we all experience affecting you, and let's see how we can help you manage them.
So I don't know, I mean, I think you speak to a lot of women about coming to you. Do you get a lot of women who maybe have already gone to their GP and then find you, and what is that kind of experience?
Well, obviously, I'm a medical herbalist, so people self-select to come to see me. So that narrows down the group. I do get people sent to me by their GP. I do get people sent to me from the hospital as well, particularly women who've had surgical menopauses and are taking drugs that mean that they are suppressing their hormones, and they're suffering big symptoms. So there's a lot that we can do with herbs, and it's an area that I work in a lot. So people who come to see me, self-selecting, with GP referrals, a lot of hospital referrals, and then obviously people start to talk about it. Women talk. That's what's so wonderful about being a woman, I find, because I chat to everybody, and you often find that you can be sitting there, going to a pottery class like I was a couple of nights ago for the first time, and within 2 minutes we'd started talking about hormones, and you're just thinking, wow, I don't know any of these people, but we're talking about hormones already. So we talk, we like to share, and I think it's really important, because it's only through talking that often we learn about what's happening with our own bodies. And women need to, as we've said, advocate for themselves, because it's very difficult to be going through these symptoms. Let's just remember the brain fog, anxiety, mood swings, hot flushes, sleep deprivation. To go through those things when you're still trying to manage, in many cases, professional lives, and trying to hide it, and not recognizing and not wanting other people to know what's happening. And it's more so for my age group. When I was going through the menopause, I had an early menopause, I had a surgical menopause, and it was not something that we very much wanted to talk about. I sort of, even though I was a herbalist and I'm very open about health, I was still sort of glossing over it. It's not affecting the way I'm performing. I'm completely able to do this job. And we need to be honest.
Yeah, definitely. And I mean, this is kind of what you touched upon earlier, that I think people do maybe have a bit of almost embarrassment, and they don't want to fully kind of admit and explain what they're going through. But I think removing that taboo and just being open, I mean, at some point it will affect all women. All women will go through, not everyone's kind of journey with menopause is going to be the same, but they will take, probably you will find some sort of similarity with everyone that you speak to.
And it's a very, to me, it's a very interesting area, because it's something that, very often we find that when we can't be intimate in the way that we want to with our partners, because it's uncomfortable, then it just gets pushed to one side. And this is an area that it is manageable. There are herbs that you can use, and it's where I often suggest combinations of using, something the GP might be able to prescribe, and alongside something that the herbalist can prescribe. I talk to patients about using sex toys. I talk to patients about re-educating the vagina to have sex again. I talk to patients about how we can have, a pleasurable time together without, I don't mean together with my patients, but I mean a pleasurable time with our partners, without being scared about our bodies. And I think it's really liberating for patients when we talk about it. And often I'll say, when we talk about libido and what libido actually means, and how we can reestablish it. And I often refer on to other practitioners who might be able to be more involved in that than I can. But it's key, because if you're not able to express that side of yourself, it tends to make your anxiety worse. Then your mood swings might be worse. And if you're anxious, you'll have a hot flush, and then that will make the symptoms worse. So all of the symptoms we talked about that we're classing as menopause, there are things that trigger those symptoms and make them worse, and stress is one of them. And whether it's stress about what's happening, children at school, or parents in difficult situations, or what's happening with yourself and your partner, it's all part of the same thing.
We'll drive it, yeah. And these are really just, I mean, a mix of kind of the common experiences you can have. We can send out this presentation as well, so you can have a proper read. But I think it is helpful drawing on other people's experiences and being able to just know that you're not alone in this journey as well.
I think some of these are really, heartfelt. I mean, the second one we've got here, appointment with the GP, she spelled out all the risks associated with HRT. I tried again and booked another appointment. I went in defensive and finally got my prescription. I noticed an immediate benefit. I mean, HRT is very, very helpful for many women, and it's really important that that we recognize that there are choices and help women to make choices. I mean, it's a big area when patients often come in already having started HRT and interested to know how we can work with HRT and herbs, and should they still be taking their HRT. There are menopause clinics that patients are referred to, but the menopause clinics often only have a small armory, which are prescription drugs, which would be different types of HRT, and they don't really have the ability to suggest herbal medicine or nutrition or other possible solutions to the problem.
Yeah, And a lot of the time, like we'll come on to today, it is a combination of a little bit of everything that is going to help. It's not always just that one thing. But we won't touch upon too much on HRT, but just making sure that, yeah, HRT, like you said, is an option for women. And for a lot of women, it can be a real big game changer for their symptoms. And it is about replacing the hormone levels that have declined naturally to help support symptoms. And like we said, for some, it can be a really big kind of impact on several of their symptoms. And it can be a real big game changer in the quality of life that they're leading with menopause. But it's not going to work for all women. That is just something that we've just listed a few there. So it is something that it's amazing that the options are there. But it's also great that, like we're going to come on to, there are other things that you can do as well.
And we mustn't forget that there are many, many women who can't use HRT. Yeah. And sometimes it's an indicator to me when I'm talking to a woman. I say, well, how did you get on with the contraceptive pill? Did you use it when you were younger? And so I couldn't use it. I had a really big side effect, so I just didn't use it. So I know that I might find that if that woman wanted to use HRT, that there could be problems there. And it's very often possible then to use herbs to balance things. And also women come to see me who are finding that the HRT is having side effects. Breast tenderness, bloating, and weight gain is a big one that women come in, and depression. And that is complicated because those symptoms just on their own can make you feel very uncomfortable and much less happy about everything that's going on with your body.
And I think, Dee, this is something that you
yeah, when do you stop? And it's a really big question because I'm old enough to and have been practicing long enough to have been through times when when I first started practicing in 1989, it used to be contraceptive pill until you went through the menopause, and then HRT until you passed away, and that was the way it was. And then there was a lot of worry about HRT and worry about side effects from it and potential cancers. So women didn't use it very much, and it wasn't as easily available. And now things seem to have turned around again, and there's different types of HRT, more bioidentical HRTs, and they've very much refined and changed them. And now women are using HRT, and the question is, when do you stop? And what happens when you stop? So many women come in and say, well, I'm taking HRT, but I am now about 52, 53, and I just don't want to take it anymore. How do I stop it? How do I know I'm not going to get pregnant? These are big questions that people ask. So again, we have to work with everybody as an individual. The one thing I always say is, do not just stop HRT and come into the clinic and go, I've stopped my HRT last week, I'm never taking it again, I feel awful, can you sort it out? Because what you've done is dropped yourself off the edge of a cliff and haven't done anything gently. With HRT, if you want to stop it, you stop it slowly and you reduce it gradually, giving your body a more natural tailoring off of a drug that you've been on.
So then herbs. Dee, I'll let you take this.
Herbs. Yes, herbs. So it was really difficult to choose what herbs we were going to talk about because I treat the person. I don't, I'm not treating how to say this? I treat menopause, but I treat the person who has menopause. I often say, you get on a bus and you look on the top deck of a bus and you look around and you think, well, perhaps half these women are going through menopause, but they're all look completely different. So how is it possible we all give them the same thing? It doesn't really work. Everybody's body is different. So I like to blend the formulas for the patient. So my patient might have hot flushes, they might have joint pains, but no brain fog. So we would blend the formulas. But there are some key herbs that I use in many of my prescriptions. And they're herbs that will be common knowledge to most people who are interested in natural remedies and herbal medicine. These are available in many chemists and pharmacists, also available, obviously, with herbalists. But I don't use them individually, I blend them. So I just wanted to flag that up. So black cohosh is probably one of the most used herbs for menopause problems. And I use it for vaginal dryness, for hot flushes, and joint pains. And a large number of people experience reduction just taking St. John's wort on, just taking black cohosh on its own, experience a reduction in hot flushes. But it's better when used in combination with other herbs. I mentioned St. John's wort there because actually black cohosh and St. John's wort is a combination that I use a lot together. If you were on the continent and, or, maybe in Germany and you had menopause symptoms, you would very often be prescribed a black cohosh product, and they use it for up to 6 months for relief of menopausal symptoms. And there's some really good clinical evidence there. So it's one of the herbs that is regularly used by medical herbalists like myself. There is a lot of clinical evidence behind it, and it works very well in combination. So I'm very keen on using black cohosh. Do I have problems with black cohosh? Occasionally a woman will say, when we're working together, we'll work out that it might cause a headache. But I would often, when I see a patient, I write a prescription, I'll see them again in a month's time, and we will discuss what has been going on, what symptoms they have, and how we can balance things. So sage, common or garden salvia that many of us have growing in the garden, in a pot herb, we use in cooking, it's in the kitchen cupboard. It's used a lot for temperature modulation, for hot flushes. And it's one of these fantastic herbs that has a double action. So, well, many herbs have double actions, but if you use sage hot in a hot tea, it makes you sweat. And it's what we call a diaphoretic. So we use it for colds and flu. But if you make it and let it go cold, it stops you sweating. So it's quite a drying herb, and it stops sweating, and it works well with black cohosh. So you can get black cohosh capsules, and you can make a cold sage tea and use those two things together. And that certainly will give you some benefit. But it will be even more beneficial if you started to blend other herbs with it. But these are probably the top herbs that I use. Obviously, they're not the only herbs, but they're key to a prescription. When I'm building a prescription for a patient, I often have what I call an anchor. So when a woman comes in and says, my main problem I'm having is hot flushes and joint pains, I'll be thinking, right, I need to anchor this prescription around that. So my black cohosh is going to be my main herb. And then I'm going to, through the consultation, which is a bit like a detective novel, we go in and we ask lots of questions and we tease out the answers. I will find that, there's a bit of depression there, and then I'll start to build in other herbs into my prescription. So St. John's wort, which is one of my favorite herbs, that's why I keep mentioning it, for perimenopause and menopause. I'll flag up now that St. John's wort is a herb that can only be used if you are not on the contraceptive pill, not taking any other antidepressants. And that's key because many women who are approaching menopause have been prescribed antidepressants. I see it time and time again that they come into clinic and they're taking an antidepressant, and when I talk to them, I think, you're not depressed. It's, what you're really experiencing is perimenopause and hormonal shift. So it's traditionally used for mild to moderate depression, but there is clinical evidence to show that St. John's wort stops hot flushes in the same way that some antidepressants actually, the pathway stops flushing. St. John's wort works on the same pathway. And I like it because it can lift the mood, it can stop hot flushes, and it works beautifully in combination with black cohosh. So we're starting to build a prescription. We're starting to be creative with our prescribing. And actually, we're working with an individual. We're not just going, reaching over and going, here's a bottle of herbs. You all take this, and this is what you need for your menopause. Everybody has a menopause. Have this. It's not like that. You're an individual. We need to treat you as an individual, and we need to work with that detective novel that is you, that's in front of me, and try and find out how I can best manage your symptoms. And then we go to what we call, and this is where Rebecca and I love working, at the foundations and the building blocks of the patient. We start to look at, well, what is it that has created you that is part of that foundation? Your gut health, your diet, everything that's going on around you. How can we help you manage all of those things? There are simple things like some CBT that might be able to help with hot flushes. Trying to help you put a proper sleep pattern in place could help. But coming back to the herbs, St. John's wort, black cohosh, and sage, a very good combination. I often put more herbs in. A prescription can be 6 herbs, 10 herbs, and also different forms of herbs. We don't just use a tincture. Most of my medicines are tinctures. So that is an extract in a liquid extract of a plant. But I also use herbal teas and capsules, and each one of those has a slightly different action. So we build everything up, and the patient will go away with a bag of hopefully solution.
Okay, that's all really helpful. I think, a lot of people. Oh, and then the last one.
We're back to my favorite subject, vaginal dryness.
Yeah.
Well, vaginal dryness, I'm sure that many women have suffered vaginal dryness at times throughout their life when you have thrush, and it's very uncomfortable, and then it can be quite dry and irritated. And I know from years of practice that there are few things that can upset a woman more than having a discomfort in the vaginal area, dis-ease within the vaginal area. And it's so easy for that to happen. It's such a delicate area with, the microbiome, it self-corrects if we give it a chance and we just help it on its way, because that is what it's designed to do. And what we really want to do is look at what things that we can use, what natural things that we use to promote the microbiome in that area, and also to try and support the tissue. If you think about it, your lips are very, very delicate, and the inside of your mouth is even more delicate. The vaginal tissue is as delicate as that, if not more, and it has the same need for care and love in a way. So wild yam, phytoestrogen plus compounds in it, and it's the plant itself I use in prescription in liquid form, but I also use it as a cream. So wild yam cream, particularly if you mix it with marigold cream, is very soothing in the vaginal area. And when you're working on the vagina, you're not just working topically, you're working internally. By internally, I mean you're going to give someone to swallow something, have it absorbed, and have the effect on the body. So wild yam can be taken internally, but it can be also used topically in a cream. And creams are key, in my view, to perimenopausal vaginal health. A cream is also absorbed into the body. So with something like the wild yam cream, you can take a small piece of it, about the size of a pea, and massage it onto your leg, and you will get an absorption of the phytoestrogen compounds within it. But you can put it into the vaginal area. The other thing that I use a lot, which I'm not sure how much we've put into this presentation, is sea buckthorn oil. So sea buckthorn oil, there's been some lovely pieces of research on it that show that it works on mucous membranes and increases the elasticity and the moisture content in mucous membranes. So I use it for vaginal dryness, and I use capsules of sea buckthorn. And you can use sea buckthorn oil topically, as well as wild yam cream. So there's a lot that you can do. And I know, Rebecca, you've got a whole raft of solutions here.
Yes. Yeah, so no, that was, really helpful, all of the herbs. And like we've always said, it's a bit of a building block. And I think a lot of what you said about the supplements is the same for herbs. It's going to be different from each individual. It's not going to be exactly the same prescription for every person. Everyone's going to have a different kind of story and something different they want to target. So phytoestrogens, I mean, I feel like we've all heard about these when we talk about menopause, but one of the things that I really wanted to focus on today is actually talking about the efficacy of phytoestrogens. And so I find a lot of women, some people find that they work really well for them and others not so well, don't really notice an effect. And actually a lot of this can even come down to our gut microbiome, as we actually do have specific bacteria in our guts that are responsible for breaking down the phytoestrogens and actually releasing the compounds that then help with the menopause symptoms like hot flushes. So potentially it is something to look at when you are starting a supplement. If you are starting a phytoestrogen, for example, actually having a first thing about how's my gut microbiome like. So looking at things maybe like bloating or flatulence, even things like your skin, your immune system. If you're getting ill quite a lot, this can be maybe an indication that there is some sort of imbalance. So targeting kind of your gut first and then adding on these regimes can be a little bit more beneficial. There was a really interesting paper actually that came out today looking at the gut microbiome of menopausal women and actually looking at the percentage of bacteria they have in their gut in certain types. And actually there was a higher level of pro-inflammatory bacteria. So there is a shift in the bacteria that we see, and it might be due to these changes in estrogen levels. But actually combating that as well can be really helpful. So I put it on the next slide, omega-3. This is really great for being anti-inflammatory, and inflammation in our body can really come back. I think inflammation, looking at it, can be really key. It can drive things like type 2 diabetes, chronic inflammation can drive things like our blood sugar control as well. So being able to control this inflammation is really important, as a lot of this inflammation was controlled by estrogen and progesterone actually. So being able to manage this through diet can really help. So omega-3 can get it through supplements, also things like oily fish, so salmon, herring, mackerel, all really great sources. Vitamin D, I mean, is important for everyone, really, the whole population, not just women. If we are living in the UK, main source is the sunlight. We do not have any of the sunlight right now, unfortunately, and dietary sources are very low. So something that I recommend supplementing with really 25 micrograms daily can be really beneficial. And I'm going to talk a bit about the maintaining bone integrity in a bit as well, because I think this is a really important point that I listened actually to a podcast on it earlier. And I think one of these things, just the structure of our bone health, being able to still move about, be flexible, is really important when we're thinking about actually living those healthy kind of long life years. And I think that is something that can be a little bit neglected. So I'm hoping that that will be helpful. Vitamin E and magnesium, also been some really great studies on hot flushes and also sleep. One thing I actually do think can be really helpful for a lot of women is actually trying to get some regular blood work done as well, to have a look at your nutrients levels. As like we're saying, everyone is going to be a little bit different. Everyone's going to be maybe have bits they're lacking in their diet, maybe some areas in their life, things like stress and poor sleep that might be affecting their nutrients levels, their gut microbiome. So having a bit of an overview, so you can do this at your GP and test your nutrients levels, there are plenty of places online now that you can do it at home as well. So having that picture of what exactly is going on can be really helpful. Probiotics, I've spoken about our gut health and our gut bacteria. So like I said, that we do have some more pro-inflammatory bacteria in our gut through menopause. So we can put in some good bacteria either through supplements, so things like capsules, but we also can get them through foods as well. So fermented foods are kefir, like yogurts, kimchi and sauerkraut. All of these as well can help. And it is, like we say, the B vitamins as well. So really important if maybe brain fog or low energy and fatigue is something that you're struggling with, maybe having a look at that. And being aware of your diet. I know a lot of people maybe are leaning towards more plant-based diets. I know it's something definitely my mum actually went through, that she really struggled to be able to digest meat once she went through the menopause, and she really had to change her diet because it just made her feel really sluggish. But then thinking about supplementing with B12. So again, it's about looking at your diet, looking at your lifestyle and seeing what you can add in. But those are just a few of the options when we're thinking about supplements that you can do.
I think one thing that's really important to pick up on, which I don't want us to miss, is that when women are going through menopause, it's often a time, in their 50s when other hormonal change is happening. So very often I see women who have slight wobbles in their thyroid and other problems at that point. So blood work is absolutely key to seeing what is going on. You often find that there is some slight changes in thyroid hormones at the same time as menopause, which actually, can make it much easier to put on weight, and other problems come to the fore. So it's really important that we look at everything that's going on. It's also a time when, we can find that there are more serious things going on that need to be really identified, like different kinds of hormone-related cancers and things can often come to the fore at this time of change. And it can be a confusing picture because it can be hidden underneath the top level of distress with brain fog and joint pains and all the rest of it, that you don't actually realize that there are other things going on. So I do urge people to have proper consultations, get some blood work done, and let's really see what we are dealing with.
And then some other things as well. We won't go kind of too deep into those, but I know, Dee, that you mentioned kind of CBT.
Yeah.
And also acupuncture as well. I don't know if there's anything that you want to touch upon either of these.
Well, I mean, I think that when you go to a clinic like Napier's, we often refer. So I might work with the patient and say, I think some acupuncture would really help you here. Or what about some CBT? And perhaps why don't we look at getting your back straightened out and a bit of support for the joint problems? Why don't you go and see the osteopath? So it's about looking at the whole person. There are many ways to, I think of it as a mountain, and there are many ways to health, and those paths cross over. And sometimes we need different tools at different times. So we must never, we must look at ways that we can help people. And acupuncture is great. It's very, very, can be very, very helpful. Works very well alongside herbal medicine. And nutrition is key, because we're not just talking about supplements, we're talking about dietary change and putting some phytoestrogens in. And I always talk to people about linseeds and phytoestrogens in beans and pulses and different foods that they can put in alongside the kimchi. So there is so much that we can do. We have the ability to take control of this.
Yeah, no, definitely. So yeah, just a bit of a summary there, and I think something that you've touched upon, everyone's experience is going to be completely different, and it is like Dee working with the individual, and then I run the consultations, and it is just about everyone is different, everyone's going to have those different trigger points, and it's building up that base and working with someone to get to the point where they're able to manage their symptoms effectively.
It's this lifestyle care, isn't it? Self-care. It's just, Go on, you explain it. It's your nutritional support, Rebecca.
My nutritional support. So we are also coming up very quickly to the hour, so I'll try and get through this kind of relatively speedily, so then we can have some time for Q&As. But generally, when I'm thinking about nutritional support for menopause, I like to break it down into 3 categories and 3 kind of main things to be thinking about and working on. So the first one is bone health. So estrogen does play a really vital role in the maintenance and development of our bone mineral density. So this can decrease over time as we get older. And actually women can lose between 2 to 3% of bone mass per year. So it does leave us more susceptible to conditions like osteoporosis and bone fractures as well. Heart health, again, our estrogen can play a role in kind of clearing the arteries and having healthy arteries. So again, it's all about, and as Dee mentioned at the beginning, these are risk factors for everyone, but it's just being aware of how things like the lowering estrogen levels and maybe a change in kind of the way you're eating or the way that you are living can maybe increase the risk of these. So might be a higher risk of developing things like heart disease and changing cholesterol levels. And then finally, the weight management as well. Again, this can be due to really a variety of factors. The way our kind of fat is distributed is slightly different, but it might also be that maybe we don't need as much food as we once did. Maybe our kind of daily activity is slightly lower. So it's putting all of these things together and not having a massive kind of overhaul of your diet or your lifestyle, but just taking parts of each that can be helpful. So thinking about bone health, so we really want to be thinking about including high quality protein in every meal. A lot of the research now on bone health is actually looking at that first meal of the day and trying to have that really protein rich. And that can be really important for helping maintain that bone health. Calcium, including plenty of dairy-based foods in your diet, or making sure if you are having a dairy-free diet, you are choosing fortified versions. Just be really mindful if you are taking a calcium supplement, making sure that you're having that alongside vitamin K2 or vitamin D, as that's really important for making sure that calcium is actually going to your bones, as if you are deficient in either K2 or vitamin D, it can actually go to your arteries, which again can cause more problems with heart health. So making sure that you're having that in combination. Vitamin K is found in foods like spinach, kale, dairy, and meats. Phosphorus, very abundant in our diet, meat, fruit, veg, nuts, seeds, and magnesium as well, really rich in plant-based foods. So that's kind of what we want to be thinking about when we're thinking about our bone health. And we're going to also supplement that with physical activity as well. And then heart health, so really thinking about, the big one is fats. So replacing saturated fats, so it's a lot of maybe animal fats, with our unsaturated fats, so things like plant oils, avocados, nuts and seeds. Really focusing on those whole grain carbohydrates, so brown pasta, brown rice, things like quinoa and buckwheat and our high fiber foods. Getting in at least those 5 portions of fruit and veg. I mean, it's something that we hear right from when we're kids, and it still has an impact now. And I touched upon the oily fish as well. So really great for getting those omega-3s in, anti-inflammatory as well. If you are following a vegan diet, having a look at vegan sources, but I do strongly recommend maybe supplementing if it's not something you include. And then things like unsalted nuts, seeds and legumes, all really good sources of our good fats and also our fiber as well. And then finally, a bit of weight management. And I think one of the best kind of studies and dietary approaches when we're thinking about menopause is actually in Mediterranean style diets. I am not a believer in making people go on any crazy diets. I know that it is something, if you are maybe going through the menopause, you've maybe started putting on weight that you haven't kind of previously, you can get really worried, it can then cause a bit more stress, anxiety, and you can be going on these crazy sort of maybe a no carb diet, some sort of paleo diet, maybe Slimming World. But actually one of the best kind of diets we see is the Mediterranean diet. So this is based on vegetables and fruits, legumes, nuts, whole grain cereals, and the use of extra virgin oil as the main fat source. And really, this is really great research for really the whole population, but really great in menopausal women. It actually has research to improve some vasomotor symptoms, so things like the hot flushes, but also was able to improve things like mobility problems, chronic diseases as well. So really helpful, we find, trying to implement this kind of diet can be really helpful for first just the kind of symptoms that you see with menopause, but also getting into those risk factors as well that we discussed. Other things you can try as well, there is some really interesting, again, it was the research that came out today talking about blood sugar control, and actually postmenopausal women have maybe an unfavorable blood sugar response, which means that they get a much higher response to their food. So they have if they have just the same meal as someone maybe premenopausal, their blood sugar will raise much higher. And when this happens time and time again, we'll get what's called is insulin resistance. And this can lead to further inflammation. This can also impact our heart health as well. So I find that some women actually find it beneficial to, instead of having that one big meal, having kind of just smaller ones throughout the day that's going to keep their blood sugar a little bit more stable. You also might find that your appetite naturally decreases as well. So this can be a nice way to actually just suit that kind of new appetite and that change in your appetite. Intermittent fasting. So there's lots of stuff around fasting, and some people do it very, very strict. Generally, the way I look at fasting is more kind of a time restricted eating. So making sure that you're having that really long overnight fast. And that is going to be really beneficial for actually controlling our blood sugar levels, but also allowing our body to rebuild things like our muscle and bone mass as well. And then having a look at portion sizing, you might find that you might be just less active. Generally, we find that just your basal metabolic rate does decrease slightly, so you might just not need to eat as much as you once did. So just being aware of that, and trying to center your meals around lots of kind of protein-rich foods, those very complex carbohydrates, and kind of really fresh fruits and vegetables. So just having a look at really what's on your plate, going back to kind of the basics. And fiber-rich diet as well, which all really feeds into the Mediterranean style, thinking about your gut health as well. And this can also be really beneficial for weight management. So a very quick overhaul of the diet, but we can definitely send you more over. But it is just taking a bit from everything and building it on. And then when we're thinking about kind of hot flushes in particular, there are a few kind of trigger foods. And if you do experience this, then it's probably something you've kind of picked up along the way. So things like spicy foods, caffeine, and salt and sugar added to food. And also, unfortunately, alcohol is one of the ones that can have a negative impact. Not just on the symptoms like hot flushes, but also thinking about things like sleep and mental health as well. And also when we're thinking about those risk factors, so things like heart disease and certain types of cancer. One of my big things is actually thinking about having alcohol-free days, and that can be really beneficial, and give your body time to recover. So having a look at those units there, we do want to be aiming for less than 14 units of alcohol per week. I think it can sneak up on you, but trying to encourage alcohol-free alternatives, things like kombucha, which is also going to be good for your gut health as well. So having a think about that. And then finally, just touching upon physical activity. So this is one of the ones that's really important when we're thinking about maintaining bone and muscle mass. It is actually something, so muscle mass does start decreasing from 30 years onwards, and then has a bit more of a decline during menopause as well. So, and I think it's something that women in particular, I think at all ages, can shy away from this kind of weight-bearing exercises, maybe fear of getting bulky. I think just not the confidence being able to do these exercises. But we do show that actually they, one, are really good for maintaining bone and muscle mass, reducing the risk of things like fractures, but also being able to reduce the frequency and severity of hot flashes as well. So generally we like to aim for 3 days a week of some sort of resistance and weight-bearing exercises. So there can be anything from kind of walking, jogging, skipping, Pilates, yoga, if you can do like weights or bands, all of these exercises. And then 2.5 hours of cardiovascular exercise as well to improve heart health. So this can be things like a brisk walk, a gentle jog, maybe doing the gardening, cleaning the house. All of these really important for heart health. And then finally, pelvic floor exercises, something that might experience things like incontinence. Actually doing these can really help try and prevent that and improve those symptoms. So yeah, very kind of quick overhaul of our kind of lifestyle, but hopefully you did get some takeaway tips from those. But then Dee, I don't know if you just want to touch upon more kind of the emotional side. I know it's something that you
I'm just thinking that there is so much that it's touching every part of our lives, you know, our diet, our emotional health, the way we're interacting with people. And there's so much that we can do, you know. We've got on this slide, break the taboo. So it's about breaking the taboo. It's about breaking the taboo about having a hot flush. It's about breaking the taboo about aging. It's about breaking all sorts of things. So, you know, use support networks, counseling, talk to people. There's lots of support that is available. And I think that we need to come out of that wardrobe and talk about it. And we need to talk about our symptoms. We need to look for solutions and not just accept it. And we also need to be aware that it's affecting our whole health. So I think it's a big, exciting bundle.
Yes, definitely. And then, yeah, even emotional self-care as well. So it is something that you touched on earlier, this kind of stress and anxiety that goes with it, that can actually aggravate a lot of other things that are going on. So anything really that for you is that sort of time for you to be able to rest and relax, whether that's journaling, reading, massage, yoga, meditation, all of these things as well play a really important role.
Rebecca, I just want to say that the dog's deciding it's time. I just want to say that as a woman who has been through the menopause, that actually a lot of these things, doing yoga, doing some meditation, changing my diet, it was all timely. And actually, it feels fantastic. It really feels like you take back control of your own body and your own life. And I think, in a way, that's what this is about. You know, it's about using herbs. It's about using supplements. It's about ownership. And it's about going, yes, I'm going to take half an hour in the morning or more and do yoga. I'm going to go to a class. I'm going to go to a pottery class like I've done and talk about vaginal health and hormones and find this empowering and think, gosh, we're all the same.
Yeah.
Let's share the story.
Yeah, amazing, definitely. So yes, we have come to the end of the presentation. So we did go slightly over that hour, but we do have a bit of time for some questions if anyone does have them. But we can also send you all of these slides as well, so people have them available. But yeah, you can either use the chat, or I think someone has raised their hand, so please feel free to put yourself off mute and go ahead.
Yeah, I don't know if I'm unmuted. Oh no, it's someone else there.
Hi there.
Hi, Lisa.
Hi. I'm afraid I came a half an hour late, and I absolutely loved the half hour I saw. So I will be looking forward to those slides. Thank you. My question is there any sort of preventive habits we can put into place before full menopause hits, because I am in perimenopause, and I think my primary symptom is these hot flashes. I probably break out in a sweat 30 times every 24 hours, and it lasts for 3 minutes. So I'm just wondering if there's anything you feel I should be doing now to prepare, or do we wait till we can't take the symptoms anymore and then we come see you?
This is a fantastic question, because it's what we see in clinic. So thank you so much. What we really advise people to do is, as soon as you start noticing change that's uncomfortable in your body or any change, then please come and have a consultation, because it's much better to prepare the body and help the body through change rather than try and sort out the problem when it's really developed. It's like all healthcare, prevention is better than cure. So if we know that a woman is going to become menopausal, which, let's face it, every woman is going to become menopausal, what we need to do is to help us all prepare for that. So there's a lot of great information in what we've been talking about, but if you come for consultations, then we can find out, what are your triggers and how to help you balance it. It might be as simple as saying, well, let's make a few changes to our diet. Let's recognize that we need to have a more plant-based diet. Let's cut alcohol and coffee a little bit. Let's start trying to downregulate those stress hormones or corticosteroid hormones. Let's have a look at doing some breathing exercises. And those simple things help move in the right direction. I mean, I've seen a few questions popping in about people who have other underlying health problems as they're going through menopause, problems such as heart disease, fibromyalgia, other things like that. So there is a lot that we can do to help women who are in that position as well.
Thank you.
Another question here. So when coming off HRT, over what period of time would you suggest tapering off?
That's a big question, and I would like to work with the individual. I mean, I've seen some women coming and saying, well, my GP just told me to stop. Other women coming and saying, well, I've been given another month's supply, what should I do? And then I will find out what the contraceptive pill is that they've been taking, or the HRT that they've been taking, and talk with them about how we're going to reduce it. I usually like to give people herbs first alongside the HRT, and then we slowly withdraw the HRT. It tends to work best. The thing that's really difficult is if somebody comes in to the clinic and says, well, I just stopped my HRT last week, so I've got all these symptoms, what can you do? And you sort of feel like saying, oh, maybe we go back on the HRT and then we just do it gradually.
I think, Rachel, do you have your hand up? You can go unmute and feel free to ask.
Thank you. Sorry, I posted this question to somebody individually. I didn't mean to. I do apologise. My question is, how safe is the black cohosh sage tea St. John's wort if you have had breast cancer 6 years ago, which was hormone
dependent?
Yeah.
So that's a very, very good question. And it's probably, the first thing I would say is if you have any underlying health issue, even if it is 6 years ago, don't try and self-prescribe with things like herbs. It's really important that you have some professional advice. When I'm treating somebody who has menopause problems, who has had estrogen-dependent hormone cancer, then I will look at other herbs that we can use, of which there are many, many herbs that are not estrogenic, although there is a lot of discussion about phytoestrogens and the way that they work within the body. And that's too big a discussion for now. But I would suggest that if that's what you're wanting to do, don't go and pick these herbs up and start self-prescribing, but look to a qualified medical herbalist who is a member of a professional body who will be able to help you. So the professional herbal bodies are the National Institute of Medical Herbalists, the College of Practitioners of Phytotherapy are the two main bodies in the UK. And with practitioners who work with those bodies, you know that you're getting continual professional development, that they have they have the experience and the backing of the National Institute and the College of Practitioners of Phytotherapy, so they're properly trained, is what I'm saying. So really, research a practitioner just as you would research anything else, as well as the herbs you're going to use.
Okay, thanks.
Dan, did you want to?
It's actually Rachel on my husband's computer.
I was wondering. I wasn't going to ask you. You never know.
I actually sent Dee a direct message, but I will just ask. I last year had I think it was described as a radical hysterectomy and oophorectomy. I have endometriosis and was put on Tibolone. I didn't notice any particularly positive side effects or whatever, and then changed to a different type of HRT called Everel, I think, which actually made me feel worse. So I'm back on Tibolone, but I feel dreadful. And I just wondered, how easy is it for me to obviously slowly come off the HRT and try herbal?
Well, that's a sort of consultation, but
yes,
it depends on your age and other underlying health problems. Right. And what we would gently do is use the two things together, herbs and the HRT, and then try and ease it off. Because you'll be getting different symptoms at different times. Menopause is a process the body goes through. So usually you start to see some period changes, and then you might start to see a few mood changes. And then you might find a bit of weight gain. So it's a process that we go through. So just stopping it like that means that everything comes at once, and we almost have to untangle it, and then you do go through a process. So I do it all the time with patients, and we work online as well. We don't, in the ideal world, you come into the clinic, but nowadays when you can look at someone's blood work and we can, maybe have contact with the patient's GP if necessary as well. We do work online a lot.
Okay. So it's probably a good idea if I contact you directly.
Well, contact Napier's clinic. There's a team of us who work there. I'm the senior medical herbalist there, but there are a team of other herbalists, and we all work with women's health. It's a big part of our clinic. In a clinic in Edinburgh, I have trained and worked with the herbalists who are there at the moment for a number of years.
Yeah, okay. But am I right that you specialise in surgical menopause?
I mean, I'm sort of outing myself now. I have had that myself. So, when you have personal experience and you use herbs, you sort of have a pretty good idea of what's going on.
Yeah.
And so I work with many women who've been through surgical menopause, and it's not easy. It's not a quick fix. You have to remember that there is not a quick fix, but you haven't found a quick fix now with your HRT, have you? So
no.
So yeah, there are things we can do.
I'll get in touch with you. Thank you.
Thank you.
There are a few questions here that are a little bit more specific, which I think probably best way would be to get in touch with the clinic and go through there. But there is one here that you mentioned that if the pill hadn't agreed with you, then HRT might not be suitable. I was wondering why that might be the case.
Interesting question. Very interesting question. Because there are some women who take the contraceptive pill and find that they have lots of side effects. And sometimes they're migraines, but often they're huge mood swings and weight gain. And not so much now, but there was a lot of that, maybe 15 years ago. I saw much more of that in clinic. And often I feel that those are the women who I see who don't work very well with artificial hormone. Now, HRT and herbs are, they're drugs, and herbs are something we can blend to the individual person, whereas the HRT you're given is a standardized product that tends to, one size fits all or doesn't. So I tend to find that if women have had problems with a contraceptive pill, they often have problems taking HRT and find it very difficult and don't like side effects. It's a generalization. It's based on my own clinical experience.
Great. I think that is most of the questions answered. I think, yes, some of them a little bit more specific, and I think probably best coming through the clinic. But we will get all of the slides over to you all at the end of this and the recording if you want to come back. And yeah, like I said, you can contact the clinic if there is anything else. But thank you so much for everyone for joining. Thank you, Dee, as well for your time. And I hope that you all found it helpful and informative and can take something away from it.
Thank you. And thank you everybody who joined, because it's a big subject and I just feel like we're warming up on it.
Thanks, everyone.